Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And since I'm new, I'm more listening and learning, but I have a couple things that have come up. When Chairman Rogers, Chairman Granger, and a few others and I were at SOUTHCOM, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, I don't know how long ago it was, we learned something that was rather astonishing, which is that obviously the Navy and the Coast Guard have a crucial role in interdicting narcotics, and we know that, I forget the number, but something like 40,000 Americans die every year. Don't quote me on that number from illicit drugs. What we learn is that what SOUTHCOM sees, they can only interdict, I think it was something like 20%. And again, don't quote me on the numbers. And so it's an issue of assets. So are there plans to increase our assets in our hemisphere to deal with narcotics? And how would sequestration potentially affect that?
Congressman, that is one of the best examples of what happens when you don't build enough ships. And it doesn't happen right away. It happens 10, 15 years down the road. We had frigates that were performing this mission in SOUTHCOM. Those frigates were built in the late 70s, early 80s, and they reached the end of their lives. We're retiring the last of those frigates this year. The follow-on to those frigates are mainly the fast frigate or littoral combat ship that we're doing, but we didn't start building them soon enough. And so there was a gap. There was a gap in SOUTHCOM. Now, the littoral combat ship, the fast frigate, will bring far more capabilities when they get there, and we're building them. We've got 24 under contract today, and so we're getting them there. We can also use this platform, the Joint High-Speed Vessel, to interdict drugs. But it's one of the crying needs that we have is to have enough assets in places like SOUTHCOM. But when the size of the fleet goes down and you have to prioritize where you put those assets, and you have Central Command, you have the Western Pacific, you run out of assets. And that's, as I said, the best example I can come up with of the effects of not building ships today will have on the people who are sitting here 10, 15 years in the future.
Yeah, and obviously that's real life, and like that, there have to be, obviously, and we've heard them today, dozens, if not more, examples of specific issues that actually are harming our national security interests. In this case, again, lives are being lost every single day, so it's a real impact. I just also, if I can ask one more question, Mr. Chairman. First, I agree with what Mr. Ruppersberger said, that it's really our responsibility to explain to people what the real life situation is, and it's real. And what the number that was never supposed to get here, which is sequester now, is here, and we have to live with it. Now, the ranking member also, I think, made a great exposition of explaining that more than 2/3 of the federal budget now is mandatory spending. We don't touch that, and so we continue to have to deal with a diminishing source of funds. Last year, the president put on the table in his budget some reforms of mandatory spending. So forget about whether there were good ones or bad ones. He at least put some reforms of the majority of the budget, which we don't touch. This year, he did not. And so we have a responsibility to do our job. The administration has also a responsibility if we're going to deal with this sequester issue, which I think we have to deal with. Do you know if there's any indication that the president is going to be looking at putting forth any proposals to reform some parts of the, which he hasn't done this year, on mandatory? And again, it's up to us to do our part, and I think we have not succeeded in doing it, but I think it requires all of us to play. And as I also being in the Budget Committee, one of our frustrations is that we've seen no such recommendation. Any idea, because we see the impact of not doing it, any idea if the president might be looking at actually putting forward some amendment to his budget on that?
Congressman, that's so far out of my lane that I'm going to get in trouble no matter what I say.
Let's keep the secretary in the naval lanes. You'd probably appreciate that, wouldn't you?
Well, again, I'm still learning, Mr. Chairman, as I said before, so I'm just trying to see what the parameters are. But again, clearly we have real-life effects of when we don't adequately fund our military.
Yeah, we'll make sure we'll do a mind sweep earlier in the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Balart. Mr. Graves.